Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, your global look at news from Taiwan. I'm Louise Watt. Taiwan's Constitutional Court is debating whether or not to end the death penalty. It's one of dozens of countries around the world that still has the punishment on the books, and it's lasted in Taiwan despite the country's transition to democracy. Joining us today is Chang Chuan-Fen, the chair of the Taiwan Alliance to End the Death Penalty. Thank you for joining us today, Chuan-Fen.
It's good to be here.
Now, let's zoom out first on general attitudes towards the death penalty in Taiwan, because it's fair to say it's not controversial here. Survey after survey shows strong support for keeping the death penalty among the public in Taiwan. Why do you think that is?
It's like everywhere else in the world. The public always favors the death penalty, and there is no exception in Taiwan. But it is also showed that if you offer the substitutions in the survey, then the majority actually will favor, for example, if there is long-term life sentence or maybe life sentence without parole, then in the survey it will show that the majority in Taiwan actually will take that substitution. And that's also the same situation in the world, that if you just offer an oversimplified question of yes or no, then you will get the misleading results. But if you offer the substitution, then people are aware that there is still some kind of punishment for the bad guys. Then they feel free to get rid of the death penalty.
Now, it used to be said in Taiwan, and maybe it still is, that if a president is unpopular, the president just has to order an execution and his popularity goes up. But we've seen in recent years under current President Tsai Ing-wen, actually the number of executions has gone down. There have just been 2 during her presidency. So has Taiwan effectively halted the death penalty, would you say?
I think in the past 20 years, at least, the number of executions has been decreased under 10. But at the same time, you could see that the crime rate does not go up, it steadily goes down. So it means that the death penalty in Taiwan doesn't have a deterrence effect like most people would expect. Most people would say if you don't kill the criminals, then people will commit more crime, but that's not true. And in Taiwan, the execution was not an order from the president, but from the Minister of Justice. But of course, there might be some order from higher, from the president. And usually, what time do they issue such an order is just random, it's just arbitrary.
And when the Ministry of Justice issues that order, what happens? How long does the inmate on death row have to prepare?
If the order was issued, then in three days, I think, the execution will happen.
And how are executions carried out in Taiwan?
Right now is injection and shooting. Injection is used to make the inmate pass out, and then the shooting was done in a very short distance by a pistol.
Currently in Taiwan, there are 37 inmates on death row, so they don't know when their execution will happen, whether it will be next week or next month or next year. So they're playing a waiting game, essentially.
Right, exactly. And that is very cruel to put someone in such a situation that he or she is just waiting and just doesn't know when it will come. And also when the execution is happening, no prior notice was sent to the families. So the families wouldn't know. And when they know, it has already been done.
So the families don't get to say goodbye?
No.
Actually, this brings us on to the next issue here. They are bringing a challenge to the death penalty in the Constitutional Court. So the Constitutional Court justices are weighing up whether the death penalty is constitutional or not. Now, how significant do you think this case is?
In the past, we have 3 times that the Constitutional Court conducted a judicial review on the case of death penalty. The first time would be 1985, and that case was about the mandatory death penalty on drug trafficking. And the court found it constitutional, so that person who didn't kill anyone, just did drug trafficking, was executed. And today, I know that many people would believe that an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I think even for them would say that it is not right for the state to kill someone who didn't kill. So in these cases, I would say that those rulings are already outdated when we look at it today. After a good 25 years, and now the Constitutional Court is rethinking about this question, whether it is constitutional or not. And I think here the central question is not about whether should we punish the bad guys. They should be punished, yes, but in the Constitution, we wouldn't allow the state to torture someone or to do slavery on someone, no matter how bad they are. And that's where we draw the limit of the state power. And today, the Constitutional Court will have to decide where do we draw the line to limit the state power? Do we allow the state to use death as a form of punishment?
Now, as we've said, this court case is being brought by the 37 death row inmates in Taiwan, but the case is under the name of one of them, Wong Shu, and you've written a book about him.
Yes.
Now, he's Taiwan's oldest man on death row. So if you could talk a little about Wong and his case as you see it.
We can go back a little bit about Wong. When he grew up, Taiwan was still under the martial law. And unfortunately, Wong was deemed as a delinquent under that. Well, the reasons now we look at it, it's just ridiculous because he wore his hair too long as a man. And also he wore a shirt that is too colorful as a man. And that was the reason that he was institutionalized. So it's like a military prison. And he was kept there for like 7 or 8 years. And after that, he was released. But with such a record, it was very difficult for him to go back and have a normal life. And when the case happened, it was 1990. At the time, he thought he was going to have, finally he was going to have a normal life. He started a small business and he was going to build his own family with his girlfriend at the time was pregnant. But he and his friends were in a karaoke and there were many witnesses. Everybody saw that a young man pulled out a gun and shot 2 victims and the young man left. But the court held Wong Shu responsible for co-conspiracy means that they plotted the whole thing together.
What evidence is there that Wong Shu could be innocent?
When he was arrested, he requested the murder weapon to be examined, and because he claimed that he never touched the gun. And the result is correct. The result confirms his claim that there was no his fingerprint on the murder weapon. And also, he just has no motive to kill these 2 victims. He barely knew them.
And what is the status of his case now? He's been found guilty, sentenced to death, but is there any other avenue for appeal?
His case was finalized in 2011. So since then, he was in the situation that we call death row phenomenon, that he could be executed anytime. But his execution is temporarily impossible because of the constitutional litigation. But if the Constitutional Court found that the death penalty is constitutional, then anytime, as long as the Minister of Justice issued the order, he could be executed.
And if the Constitutional Court finds it's not constitutional, what would happen to Wong and the other death row inmates?
It depends. It could have numerous possibilities. For example, if the Constitutional Court found that it is completely unconstitutional, then they might give like 2 years to the Legislative Yuan to come up with the new laws, and then afterwards all these death row inmates could be, their sentence could be converted to these new sentences. That would be one possibility. Another possibility is that if the justices find that, okay, the death penalty is basically constitutional, but if someone with mental illness, then they cannot be sentenced to death. In that case, among these 37, there will only be a few of them could be exempted from the death penalty. And also, it's also possible that if the justices say that, because all of them in the Supreme Court, they did not have an oral debate in the Supreme Court, and their case were finalized. So the justices could say that that procedure is unconstitutional. Then all these cases will go back to the Supreme Court and have it all over again, but it's possible that they again be sentenced to death penalty, then they can be executed.
What are your own personal hopes for Wong in the future?
What I hope for him is to have an ordinary life that he thought he was about to have when in 1990. No matter how late it becomes, I think it's always better than never. And I also think that because his case was convicted without solid evidence, and it's such a weak case, and I really think that it is not justice at all to sentence him guilty and not to mention the death penalty. So I do hope that he will get a chance to have a real life.
And finally, it's important, obviously, for Wong and the other death row inmates to have this judgment that the death penalty is unconstitutional. But why do you think it's also important for Taiwan?
I think Taiwan occupied an important and specific position because in Asia, Taiwan's democracy is, I think, undoubtedly in the leading position. And we know that in 2010, Korea, the Constitutional Court ruled the death penalty constitutional. And I would hope that if Taiwan could take one step further, we could take up the role to spread out the democracy and human rights issues, starting from Asia, because I think relatively it's still not that widely accepted. But I think it would be nice if Taiwan could be the first country to do this. And also I think like in the same-sex marriage experiences, it's quite obvious that although the Constitutional Court comes up with a conclusion that the public does not like at the time, but it is proven that the society still adapts very well. When we take the courage to make developments in human rights, and actually it brings out a better society that every one of us are better in it.
Chuan-Fen, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
This has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. For more news from Taiwan, do follow our social media. Thank you for watching. See you next time.
You're watching TaiwanPlus News, the voice of freedom in Asia.